and someone else is coming, so we'll just
Catch.
Oh,
A really bad catch.
that was really bad. I already had another one in my hand. Okay. All right, so the topic we'll be discussing today is the topic of gun control, and we'll be taking the position that we should not have greater gun control restrictions.
In 1791, our founding fathers wrote the Constitution to set the guidelines of what their new America should look like. In more recent years, an argument has arisen that there should be stricter control over who can own and use guns, in hopes that this would decrease gun deaths and firearm suicides. Not only would this argument undermine the individual liberties that were given to citizens by the Second Amendment, but it also limits the protection that people can provide for themselves. These laws were made for and continue to effectively preserve the safety and constitutional rights of American citizens, and should continue to do so.
So as mentioned, right, this is a constitutional right. It's found in the Second Amendment, and a lot of us are familiar with the language, but we'll go ahead and go over that. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So this text is clear in its protection of the right of the American people to bear arms. There's often an argument made about the word militia, that it's actually not encompassing the American people, but it was back then, it was something that they needed, and it's sort of like the National Guard today, so it shouldn't extend to the rights of all people. It's worth noting, though, that in 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed that the Constitution does, in fact, protect the right of the people at large to bear arms, irrespective of militia service, in the case of District of Columbia versus Heller. And so this right continues to be valid today. Historical analysis of the Constitution indicates that the term militia was understood by the framers to embrace all white males of certain age who are suitable for military service, says one legal scholar. He's also led to conclude that the reading of the Second Amendment that encompasses the protection of a fundamental individual right is reinforced by the plain meaning of the provision, because militia in the Constitution refers to all people. And just to round that off, one of the framers said, his name is George Mason, he said once, "I asked, sir, what is a militia? It is the whole people except for a few public officials."
Heller won his case, and as such, put a new definition on personal gun rights. This definition included the fact that regulating the use of individual guns is infringing on the civil liberties given to them in the Constitution. More than this, state control has also been governed and regulated when it comes to guns. The McDonald v. Chicago case is an example of this, where it was basically held that the 14th Amendment makes the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms to the people for the purpose of self-defense applicable to the individual states. This means that basically the 14th Amendment, one that prevents states from governing individuals, is used in this case to apply the Heller case to states. We can see that not only is it valid for individuals to regulate themselves, but it's actually encouraged by the other amendments in the Constitution. In 1966, an active shooter named Charles Whitman entered the University of Texas and began to shoot. This came to be known as the first mass school shooting in the country, and one that particularly scarred people as it was recorded and posted online. Not only did it last for over an hour, but the 25-year-old student killed 16 and injured 31 others. UT didn't have its own police force then. Therefore, officers called on civilians for assistance. Civilians began firing at Whitman. One rifle-carrying citizen, Alan Crum, was deputized on the spot. Crum and 3 officers shot Whitman repeatedly, eventually killing him and ending the 96-minute massacre. Due to the lack of available police during this incident, the students of UT were able to use their weapons to defend themselves and their classmates against Whitman's brutality. It took over an hour and a half and civilians' help, but Whitman's killing spree was eventually put to an end. Without the help of these armed students, who knows how long the shooting could have gone on? How many more people could have died? In scenarios where gun control is stricter, it will be so much harder for people to defend themselves from others who obtain their guns in a less safe and possibly less legal way.
So, one of the two big reasons why the right to bear arms is so essential, not just some outdated, irrelevant thing of the past that the founders wrote in the Constitution, is, as she was saying, the defense against crime, but also the defense against government tyranny as well was a huge thing on the minds of the framers. Elbridge Gerry, an early representative of Massachusetts, was recorded as saying, "Whenever governments mean to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise an army upon their ruins." And we already discussed the meaning of militia. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that when the government does something like raise taxes or just do something that irritates people, they should go take arms and start a revolution. But if the government descends into full-on tyranny and denies us our fundamental natural rights, then we have another check that the founders designed to protect ourselves from that, so we can keep those rights. And of course, also self-defense is huge in this debate. The possibility that one may need to use a firearm for self-defense is very likely. Home invasions, assaults, riots, robberies, rape, and many other violent threats can be deterred and also thwarted by the proper use of firearms. In 2013, the CDC put out a study that reported that, quote, almost all national survey estimates indicate that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive use by criminals, with estimates of annual uses ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million per year. This is striking. Gun violence instances are much discussed, but what about these self-defense uses? How many lives have been saved due to the right to bear arms? We might not know for certain, but the numbers must be extremely high. And so as long as we honor this constitutional right, many more Americans will be able to save themselves from life-threatening situations.
No!
Bam. All right. There you go.
Okay. While the idea of having stricter laws on guns is good to decrease gun violence, there's also the argument of, what about the criminals who obtain their guns illegally? Look at most major shootings from the past and you'll start to notice a trend. A disturbing amount of shooters, especially like school shooters, are people who aren't supposed to legally have guns. The Columbine shooting, for example, was a tragedy with 13 innocent killed and 23 injured, not including the killers who took their own lives after. If we look into how these kids got their guns, we can see that the shotguns were bought from an unlicensed seller, and because they were purchased for someone else, it constituted an illegal straw purchase. A semi-automatic pistol was purchased from Mark Maines, who knew they were too young to purchase the assault pistol but sold to them anyway. Stricter gun laws unfortunately won't stop people from buying guns, but instead will just encourage people to buy them in a more dangerous and illegal way. In some other cases, such as the shooting at Westside Middle School, the guns were legally owned, just not by the shooters. In this case, 2 middle school boys stole guns from their family members. A brief summary of the event displays that Andrew Golden, who was 11 at the time, committed a school shooting with Michael Johnson, who was 13, in 1998. While one boy couldn't get into the protected safe, the other could simply grab his father and grandfather's guns, which were hanging in an open area with no protection. This is clearly a fault not only for the very young boys, but of the father and the grandfather, who hung their guns up in a public area with little to no protection. This is especially dangerous if the area in question is a place where children could easily access it. If we enforce stricter gun laws than the ones we have currently, we wouldn't prevent thievery from family or anyone else who has access to a gun. These new laws would only prevent people who can get guns from legally getting them.
A 1990 study across major U.S. cities found that gun control laws generally show no evidence of effects on violent crime rates. So the idea that this is going to be the solution to all of these mass shootings is fallacious, and all the violent crime, and it's going to cost us our constitutional rights if we dabble in this kind of stuff. Across the board, states that have more gun control often do not have less mass shootings. In fact, sometimes the contrary. California, for instance, a state that's infamous for heavy gun control policies, has had 17% of America's mass shootings since the year 2000. If you compare that to Texas, with a comparable population and less gun control laws, they only had 6.6%. The Obama administration in 2016, hardly a anti-gun control administration, by the way, too, they studied how prison inmates obtained the firearms they used to commit violent crimes, and the study found only about 10% actually obtained their firearms through retail sources. So again, even if we ban guns, it's going to just remove them from the arms of law-abiding civilians. Criminals hardly get these guns through the proper means anyways in the first place, and they still won't when we ban these. It's just again going to stop the good that these firearms can do, which is provide self-defense to the American people. So we must continue to defend the right to bear arms as declared in the Constitution. It's an essential right for a free people due to its enhancement of defense against tyranny and crime, and the lack of efficacy of gun control policies should indicate to us that there is no good reason to obliterate our essential constitutional rights, even amid all the emotion and controversy of today's political climate. Bam. Done.
I thought it was snowing like halfway through.
All right.
Yeah, I was like, ah.
That was total 15 minutes.
How many people are going to watch this? Like 5?
Yeah, seriously. I'll watch like the first 5 minutes, and then they're just going to comment.
To make the first 5 minutes really interesting.
You're going to have to redo that.
I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm saying.